In this video, you're going to learn how you can use Microsoft Power BI to analyze your Sage 50 accounts data by department. Now, you would think that's actually something very simple to do. You'd think that it is as simple as creating your visualizations in Power BI and then slicing them by department. Well, it is, and it isn't, because there are some subtleties, and those subtleties depend on actually how you're using departments within Sage 50 and how you've got them set up. What I'll do is I'll take you through my own learning process that I went through in building the Subtleties BI solution using Power BI for Sage 50 accounts. I'm assuming that you already have a basic understanding of Microsoft Power BI and a basic understanding of Sage 50 accounts. So the first thing to do is to look at the data that we have coming into Power BI and where the departmental data is. We're connected at the moment into Microsoft Power BI Desktop. And in the background, what I've done is I've brought in, using my Subtleties BI data feed, I've brought in my Sage 50 accounts data. Now, to all intents and purposes, this is the standard Sage 50 accounts ODBC data with some additional tables and some additional calculator columns and calculator measures and relationships built to make modeling easier. And this is basically my basis for the Subtleties BI solution for Sage 50 accounts. If we look at the tables on the right-hand side, what we see is I've renamed the tables. They're not the standard ODBC names. I've renamed them into names that are perhaps a little bit more understandable in plain English. But what we will soon realize is that there's department information in many places within the Sage 50 accounts data set. The first thing to see is, yes, we have a departments table. And this is just simply a list of departments and their department numbers. If I just open up a new page, I can just show you. Create a new table. Select departments, say department number. And department name. So here I've got 5 departments set up: e-commerce, pharmacy, beauty salon, hair salon, and retail. And the context here is I'm actually using departments as a way in which to segment my customer base, and therefore to segment my sales transactions that I do through those customers that belong to particular departments. That's one way in which you can use departments in Sage 50. There are other ways as well. And it's depending on how you use Sage 50 and Sage 50 departments will depend on how you decide to use the data within Microsoft Power BI. And that's what we'll see now. So firstly, I have a departments table, okay? The next thing I see is that actually within my Power BI data set or Sage 50 data set, I've got department information in many places. So in my customers table, here I have department. Likewise, in my suppliers table, there I have department. In my products table, I also have department, okay? And you have this within Sage 50. And so for your products, your customers, and your suppliers in Sage 50, you can set up a default department for that customer, supplier, or product. Then we have transactions. And I have, say, sales invoices. I have department information there for sales invoices. I have sales invoice details, which are the individual line items of each invoice. And I have departmental information there as well. I have purchase orders and I have departmental information there. And I have my, where are we? Transaction details. Now this is the really low level departmental information I have coming up from Sage 50 at the audit split level, within Sage 50. So what we see is we've got a table of departments, and then we've got several other tables that use departmental information. And instinctively, it's very tempting to think, a relational model here, and I can just create my relationships between my departments table and the other tables. Well, that's not the case, but we'll just take a look at why that's not the case. So if I go into my relationships window, here, that's a better view. Okay. Now, this is not my complete relationships view within the Suntica BI data model. What I've done, just for simplicity, I've cut out a lot of stuff that's not relevant for this demonstration, just to make the screen a little bit clearer. But here we have our departments table, and I don't have any relationships set up. We've got a customers table, and hanging off the customers are sales orders, and then from sales orders, the sales order details. I have sales invoices, and then hanging off sales invoices, I have the sales invoice details. I have a products table, and from the products table, I'm also linked through to the sales order details and the sales invoice details and the purchase order details as well. I've got suppliers, and I've got purchase orders hanging off the suppliers and purchase order details hanging off the purchase orders. Now, and then finally, I have my transaction details, where I've got the low-level final resting place for every single transaction that happens within Sage 50. So not just the sales invoices and purchase invoices, but also the receipts, the credits, the journal debits, the journal credits, and so on. So if I try and create a relationship between my departments table and other tables, we can very quickly see the problem. Create a relationship there between departments in my departments table and my customers table. Okay. So that's now created a one-to-many relationship between my departments table and my customers table. Now let's just try doing that between my departments table and my products table. I think some of you can already see where this is going. Okay. So here I have department number and department number, and I'll just drag that relationship there. Okay, and we can see this relationship has a dotted line. So let's click on that, double click on that to edit it. And if I want to make that relationship active, I get a warning, and it says I can't, because it would create ambiguity between products and departments and sales order details. Now let's just take a look at why that is. Okay, so I'm actually going to delete that relationship, and I will delete my relationship with my customers table as well. I was just using this to illustrate a particular point. Now, the reason why I can't use departments then as a kind of relational model, it perhaps is quite obvious here, because if I have a parent-child relationship between departments and customers, then a sales order created from that customer will inherit that department, and any detail items created against that sales order will also inherit that department. But there's a direct relationship between sales order details and product information, and products have their own department default. Therefore, which relationship or which department number do I take for my sales order details? Do I take the department from my customer table or from my products table? And it is for this reason and this ambiguity that we cannot think of departments as some kind of relational model. So what does this mean in terms of trying to visualize our data and analyze it within Microsoft Power BI? What it actually means is that in every table that contains departmental information, we really need to treat that departmental information as just an attribute of that table, and as though it has no relationship whatsoever to any other information within the model. Now that might sound odd, but it makes perfect sense, because if you're using Sage 50, for example, we'll just take a quick look into Sage 50. at every step of the way, you can actually, through the life cycle of a transaction, you can actually modify the department of that transaction right through to the end. So say for example, you had a customer, and if you take this one, ABS Garages Limited, and we go to defaults, here we've got a default department of 1 set up for that particular customer. And if I create a sales order for that customer, and choose a product code of A4 ledger book, and save that sales order. Yes, I'll continue, and I'll allocate now. Okay. So that's created this new sales order for the customer, and I can open that up. Now I can look at the footer information on there, and actually and by default, it's created this sales order as department 1. But actually, if I wanted, I could change that. I could change it to department 3. Okay, you might ask why I want to do that, but there could be reasons why you want to do that. But also, if I look at the products table, if I look at this A4 ledger book as a product, and I've got a default department number 1 for that product. And again, I can change that to admin. Now, if I go back to my sales orders and I choose to dispatch the order, therefore generate an invoice, here's my invoice for that order. And I've got department 3 set up for this invoice, okay, which is not the same department as I have set up for the, well, it's the department I have set up for the customer, but not the same as I have for the product. And again, I can change that if I want to say 5 for the invoice. Now, if I choose to post that invoice and update the ledgers, so that invoice is now posted. If I go into my transactions detail, I choose today. Here's the transaction I just did, and I can open that up. Now, despite the sales invoice being set to a particular department, the product being set to a different department, the customer being set to a different department, at the transaction level, this comes through as department 1. Okay, and again, I can open this up and I can edit this departmental information if I wanted. And I can change that department to department 7. And that's now changed the department on this transaction level of this invoice to department 7. Now, there are practical reasons why you may want to do this in Sage and why you may want to change departments from the defaults as the transaction completes its life cycle, especially actually as it ends up in the the transaction audit log that we see here. So what we've got is a life cycle of a transaction where, depending on whether we look at the product information, the customer information, the sales order header, the sales order detail, the sales invoice header, the sales invoice detail, or the final resting place of the transaction, we potentially have different department numbers. So if I'm in Microsoft Power BI and I want to analyze my sales data by department, which department do I use? And that then comes down to, what is it that you're actually trying to do within Microsoft Power BI, and how are you using departments within Sage 50? Well, there are two main ways in which you can use departments within Sage 50. And these two ways are used quite commonly. There's the way that Sage, I believe, originally intended departmental functionality. And that's as a way to group transactions at the lowest level, and transactions of any type, together for reporting purposes. So what I mean by this is you can group purchases and sales, journal debits, journal credits, sales receipts, purchase payments, all together as one group under one department. And by doing that, that enables you to produce departmental profit and loss and balance sheet reports, almost like a company within a company type reporting. And if you're going to do that, you have to be able to edit the final resting place of the departmental information right down at the audit level, if you want to make sure that everything is done correctly and everything is allocated correctly against the department. But since we don't have a kind of parent-child relational model going on within our department structure in Sage 50, if you edit it at the detailed transaction level, you're not editing it at the parent levels, and we end up with an inconsistency in the department numbers. So what this means is, if you're wanting to do departmental analysis and you have set up your departments in Sage 50 to group at the low level, transaction detail level, then if you're analyzing your data in Sage 50 by department, then it is the department information in the transaction details table that you would use to slice and dice your visualizations. If, however, you're using Sage 50 as departments as a much simpler way just to segment your customers, or segment your products, or segment your suppliers, then you would use the departmental information at the customer level. Well, if you're segmenting by customers, that is. And you would use the department information here, held within the customer table. And that, of course, is going to produce different results in your visualizations, because those department numbers may be different. But once you understand that, it's actually very simple. So the rule is this: if you're using departments as a way to segment your low-level transactions and group those, then it is the low-level transaction departmental information that you use within Microsoft Power BI. If you're using it to segment your customers, then it is your departmental information in your customers table that you use, and not the departmental information in any of the other tables. If you're using it in your products table to segment your products, then you take the departmental information from your products table, and so on. So I'll give you a very simple illustration. In this very simple illustration, I've got a couple of charts showing sales activity by customer over the last 52 weeks. I've got 381 active customers with an average sales per customer of just over £10,000. And I've got a nice tree map here of my top 20 customers and other customers by total business in the last 52 weeks. and then color-coded by the average transaction value. Red means it's a small transaction value, and green means it's a high average transaction value. Now, what if I want to segment this by department? Well, in this particular data model, in this data set, I am using departments as a way to segment my customers. So if I want to now choose a visualization, choose to segment this visualization by department, it now becomes very simple. I choose the department from my customers table, not from any of the other tables. All I need to do is just drag that up to this visualization and segment by department. And now I have my departmental analysis, and I can drill down. I can choose to select just my retail customers or my e-commerce customers. Or I can choose my drill down option within this visualization, and I can see the breakdown of the customers that make up my retail department. Or my hair salon department. So to conclude, working with departments in Microsoft Power BI, your Sage 50 accounts departments, is actually very simple. But you just need to pay real attention to how you are using departments within Sage 50. If you're using it to group transactions, then you use your departmental information at the transaction level. If you're using it to segment your customers or your products or your suppliers, then you use your departmental information at your customers, products, or suppliers level. If you'd like to read more about this, there is an accompanying article that was published this week in AccountingWeb, and the link to that is at the footer of this video. And if you'd like to have a play around with this demo data set, there's also a link to a live interactive demo at the foot of this video.